So rehashing of some of the general trends that we see everywhere, of course, GDP is increasing because of population, and fuel consumption is increasing as well. But we heard about all the limiting factors for growth of fuel consumption, and some of the ones that we hear that is having an immediate impact is this IMO 2020, and that's having a major impact on the heavier portion of the crude, the resids. There's going to be pressure to reduce the fuel consumption. So even if the economy is going to grow, GDP is going to grow, fuel consumption will not keep pace with it. As opposed to that, the picture with petrochemicals is totally different. Petrochemical consumption is expected to grow faster than GDP. And if you think about it, two countries are mainly responsible, China and India, 40% of world population. And everything can be made cheaper in China, so the rest of the world can consume petrochemicals in a much larger proportion. So you will see that the demand for petrochemicals is increasing, but there is another factor to this petrochemical demand. Why someone should consider more petrochemicals is because the margins. So there is a demand factor is there, and when you look at the pricing of petrochemicals versus pricing of fuels, fuel price always rides on the price of the crude, but petrochemical prices, that is a little bit more complex. Sometimes it could be bad, but overall, people always find that petrochemical, the margins are much, much better. So that is definitely an area that has taken everyone's interest. Now, if you talk about integrating those two things, you got to see, what are the synergy in those. So petrochemicals need feedstock, refining feedstock is crude oil. So the feedstock for petrochemical comes from refining. So you got to find when you think about integration, am I making the right kind of feedstock for the petrochemicals I want to produce? There are other considerations to take into account, such as the fuel sources, transportation costs. Also, to a significant degree, you need to think about where is my market for the finished products. If it is right close to me, then you are better off making petrochemicals in that area. So if you will see that there have been lots of, the traditional model for doing fossil fuels or the crude oil was first to do refining. So let's use the existing infrastructure in refining and then start having more petrochemical units nearby. And there are some synergies there because petrochemicals, oftentimes production involves production of hydrogen, and refineries require a lot of hydrogen for primarily hydroprocessing for having cleaner fuels. And then refinery produces some products like naphtha, which is a good feedstock for petrochemicals, and petrochemical production like steam cracker that produces pygas oil, which is difficult to get disposed of, and you can feed that into refinery and get rid of it. So if you want to look into this, the value proposition that we kind of offer here is that if you look at what I represent is McDermott technology, there are two aspects of it. We have Lummus technology portion, which is historically known to be a very strong petrochemicals licensor. And then the other arm of it, when it comes to refining, we also have our refining as Lummus technology, but for hydroprocessing, we have Chevron Lummus Global. So between the two sides of it, a refining arm and a petrochemical arm, you have really the know-how and knowledge how best to integrate that. Because once you start delving into this topic, you will realize that it is really complex, and there is no one solution for all. The solution for every refiner or a petrochemical producer who wants to integrate that is going to be very different, and actually with time it will also change with the availability of feedstock, the feed pricing, product pricing. So I'll start with a traditional, fairly modern refinery, and you guys have seen all this. So an atmospheric tower, NHT, CCR, isom unit to primarily make gasoline. Then you have you're making some diesel, and then you take the heavier portion and you go to a vacuum tower, and then you're upgrading the resids. So upgrading the resids. So primarily the focus here is to make gasoline, jet, diesel, And historically also used to be fuel oil, but fuel oil, there are a lot more limitations coming, and that has created a significant challenge for people. Delayed coking was a good solution, but delayed coking is also having some issues nowadays with restrictions on use of the coke. So that's another challenge. But in the traditional sense, if you see, the bottoms of the barrel used to be handled by a, say, VGO hydroreater, and the VGO will then feed the FCC, or sometimes you will have an RDS, ARDS type of unit, and in the very bottoms of that vacuum resid, you get rid of that in a delayed coker. So now if you look at petrochemicals, when you talk petrochemicals, you're talking about the building blocks of petrochemicals, which is really speaking the light olefins, C2, C3, C4, and the aromatics. And then there is a whole petrochemical chain that goes beyond that. So how do you make these? You basically make this either in a gas cracker or a liquid cracker. Liquid crackers were very predominant for a long time, but now with the advent of shale gas, especially in North America, the gas crackers are really coming back in a big way. And there is a significant difference in the economics, because the availability of that gas and the price of gas being cheaper, and processing also being cheaper, there is an advantage if you're doing gas cracker. Now, gas crackers will, however, give you very limited products, is primarily ethylene and propylene. But when you talk about liquid crackers, you go in all the C2, C3, C4s, the BTX aromatics, as well as, in the end, you produce the pi gas and the pyrolysis gas oil, fuel oil as your essentially undesired byproducts. So knowing these two things, okay, so one more thing here. Now the new thing that people are saying is, in the old days there used to be mostly just liquid crackers or gas crackers, but now technology has really improved to integrate these two things. And the integration is, you have mixed feed crackers, so you can have the same kind of back section, and you can use the same, your heater boxes, to have gas crackers and liquid crackers in them. So essentially you're producing the entire gamut of the petrochemicals by having a mixed feed cracker. Now let's look at what is a good way to integrate this thing. Because when you talk about integration, you're talking about using the products which are created from the refinery and consuming them as much as possible in the petrochemical complex. So you want to minimize the production of your fuels to the extent possible, because that's what's going to give you your best return, or the GRM. So for that, what we suggest is it's a very good idea to use hydroprocessing. And why is that? Because the lighter portion of a crude oil, converting that to petrochemicals is easy. It's a heavier portion that is problematic, which has been going into fuels. So in order for you to upgrade the heavier portion of the crude oil to petrochemicals, you need to do hydroprocessing. So you need to go through a step first in order to create some lighter feedstock, and that's going to be your naphtha or diesel, and then feed that to a steam cracker and then make petrochemicals out of that. But the resids coming out of crude oil, the resid part of crude oil, is not eminently suitable for that. So you are using, so we have this process called resid upgradation, which is a family of processes called LC fining, LC max, LC slurry. These are ebullator bed resid hydrocracking processes. So they are going to really reduce the amount of resid significantly, convert that primarily to VGO and diesel, and then you can take that further and send that to a hydrocracker and produce more of the naphtha and diesel, which make good feedstock, as well as VGO. And I'll come to that. There is something special about the VGO that comes out of a hydrocracker. So I'm going to cut to this one first. So it is showing that same concept of hydroprocessing as a part of this integration. So here the point that I want to make is there's a significant difference if you are using steam cracking of straight run vacuum gas oil, that it is making, of course it depends on the kind of crude you have, the kind of properties of VGO, but let's say that it's making something like 18 to 8% production of ethylene out of that VGO. As opposed to that, if you have this kind of scheme with similar kind of crude and you go through this process that's been shown, then with a hydrocracked VGO, your yield can go up to 32%. So really speaking, I mean, it's the addition of hydrogen that changes the nature of the VGO. It makes it much more paraffinic, and it makes it a much better feedstock to produce your light olefins. So that's it's a very critical step in order to increase the profitability of your integration or integrated scheme. Now, the resid upgrading portion, the overall economics is also going to depend upon how much resid you're going to convert. And then, we have here 3 processes. One is the LC refining. There are several units around the world, and then they operate up to anywhere between 60 to 80% kind of conversion. Then there is a newer version of that, which is LC Max, which uses solvent deasphalting as a part of that. And you can take the conversion all the way up to 90 plus range, the lower 90s. And then there is a newer version of that, which is LC slurry, which is a true kind of slurry process. And in that, you can get 97% conversion. So all of that is really going to play into the economics of your integration. So when it comes to the steam cracker, a lot of innovations have taken place in this technology over the years by Lummus as well as others. And nowadays these technologies you can get, Lummus technology has short residence time pyrolysis furnaces, which provide you very high yield and long run length. And there are innovations about whether you use low pressure chilling train, high pressure chilling train, front-end acetylene converter, back-end acetylene converter. All that depends on what you want to make and what your feedstock is. And a new innovation in that is the multi-component refrigeration, which is a tertiary refrigeration. So that really gives you significant advantage in having a reduction in your compressor cost and equipment count. So now this graph, the bar chart that you see, that shows the flexibility of feed. So now when you are making petrochemicals, they got to choose what feedstock you have. And now since it's with the refinery, you got to take whatever the refinery is producing. So of course, ethane is just shown for kind of information that ethane is going to give you the highest yield of ethylene. But then as you keep on moving down to the refining products which are produced, going from naphtha to AGO to VGO, you will see that the yield of the petrochemicals is actually dropping down. But then the last bar chart that you see, you will see that in the last bar chart, the hydrocracked VGO is giving you a significant increase. And that's why the scheme of integrating hydroprocessing together with the refining, upstream refining and downstream petrochemicals is very useful. So, really speaking, 3 aspects of it now. Hydroprocessing, you got to optimize your cracker feeds. But now hydrogen addition does not come free. So you got to have, good source of hydrogen. Again, it depends on economics, how you're going to make your hydrogen. Someone who can make hydrogen from natural gas definitely has tremendous advantage. If you're using this route, in hydroprocessing, you can also make lube oil base stock, which is not exactly a petrochemical, but it's a very high value product. In terms of your petrochemicals now, using the steam cracker, you got to really think about how much propylene and how much ethylene you want to produce. So that feed flexibility, the cracker operating severity, what propylene to ethylene ratio you want, all that is important. And then the next heavier list of products is C4s and the aromatics. So there is a scheme for that I'll talk about, which So now let's look at a configuration in which you really want to make primarily polypropylene and polyethylene. So in that case, what you're doing is you're getting all these, you're primarily going to use a naphtha that's coming from your refinery, and you're trying to consume that. So that is going to make some of the heavier things like the mixed C4s. The mixed C4s are going to contain your butenes as well as the dienes, acetylenes, and pyrolysis gasoline. So the simplest way, if you really want to make only ethylene and propylene and the polymers of that, you're really going to saturate all that and recycle that back to your cracker. Now, if you want to say that I want to really take advantage of the value chain of C4. So in C4, butadiene is an excellent product. In butadiene goes into your SBR as well as a whole bunch of other things. Then in C4s, there is butene 1. Butene 1 also is a comonomer for production in LDPE. So that's an important thing. Then there is MTBE. MTBE for some reason got a bad word in India and in the United States, but it is still being used around a lot of places in the world. And one advantage of MTBE, and actually Reliance over here has done this thing, which is actually you make MTBE and you back crack it to make very high purity isobutene, which is very useful for making specialized halobutyl rubbers. So for that, this first making MTBE and then back cracking it, that's a very useful process. So in this whole chain, the first thing in mixed C4s you would do is you will take your C4s and first you remove by extraction your butadienes. Then you are hydrogenating the, partial hydrogenating the butadienes to get rid of it completely. And then you going making MTBE. You can back crack it to make isobutene. Now what remains is butene 1 and butene 2. So the butene 1 can be recovered. And butene 2 actually either can go for making alkylate, or you can use that butene 2 to make higher amount of propylene. Now since you are working together over here with the steam cracker unit, you have plenty of ethylene available. So this process you see here at the bottom, the olefin conversion technology, that is a metathesis process. So you're taking a C2 together with a C4 to make two C3s. So this allows you to make higher production of propylene. And if you have all these things together, basically the prices of ethylene and propylene are going to vary. And then depending on the market demand, you can use this as a floater kind of unit to maximize. If you want to make more propylene, you can make it. If not, you don't make it. And then the last chain is, if you talk about the C5 plus pi gas, then in that you are making the aromatics. So typically the production of how much pi gas you produce depends again on what is being fed. With naphtha, you will make less. As you go to a heavier portion, you will probably make more. And then, so here you are really taking out the benzene, toluene, and xylene. Benzene can go, benzene will make styrene or cumene, and for that you need ethylene and propylene, which are again available from the steam cracker unit. And the xylene, you make paraxylene. So this is just showing, everything basically I said, that, putting everything together with front end being your just typical refinery, the central part of it being the hydroprocessing, and then the mixed feed steam cracker. Now there is one thing I did not quite cover here, but it's there, is a lot of people in India, when they talk about making petrochemicals, they have FCC units in the refinery. So they're using high propylene FCC, high propylene production, and Lummus and Indian Oil, they have together this technology called INMAX, which can give you a very high production of propylene. And there are a whole lot of units which are coming up in India on that. So this is almost like my last slide. So today what we talked about really is this. When I talked about integration, I really talked about integration in which you really have a refinery, and then I'm going to think from this refinery, how am I going to make maximum petrochemicals? So this is really speaking the traditional way. What I did not talk about, but that's going to be the next thing which is coming, which is direct crude to chemicals. Now that's a whole subject in itself, and people always ask about that to me, and in fact we recently signed something. We have some kind of partnership or arrangement with SABIC and Aramco to work on this thing. But people always ask me about how can I make go straight from crude to chemicals, and they want to have I want to have 70, 80%. And I always say you can do that, but the most important thing is your feedstock. If you don't have a good feedstock, you really can't do it. You really need to have very light feedstock. So, this is my last slide. I think I said enough. Thank you very much.